let's get started. We're live here. Good to see y'all today. And we're going to be in Proverbs 1 and 2, maybe. We'll see how far we get. Joy and Evan weren't here last week. I think everybody else was. I'll do a quick little recap to get us up to where we were. We pretty much stopped now verse 7, I think. We did quite a bit of discussion about wisdom versus knowledge versus just information and all that sort of stuff. So we're in Proverbs, and again to recap, Proverbs means what? Anybody remember what the word Proverbs means? A comparison. There you go, comparison. And ultimately it's been accepted that it means wisdom. So I pointed out, or noted anyway, 7 things down through verse 7, basically, verse 6, I guess, that are 7 things or reasons to read Proverbs. To summarize those, the first one is to know wisdom, to know what wisdom is. That's kind of the first idea, and again, that's what Proverbs is all about, is sharing wisdom, drawing a comparison to bad choices versus good choices, all that sort of stuff. So to know wisdom, to know instruction is the second thing. To perceive the words of understanding. And I'm just pulling all these out from the verses. Verse 2 is where those come from. Verse 3 says to receive the instruction of wisdom. So that's interesting, to know wisdom, to know what wisdom is, and to receive instruction from wisdom. The last part of this chapter talks as if wisdom is speaking to us, which is kind of cool. So the first part of it kind of opens this up as we need to know what wisdom is, and we need to perceive the words, or receive the instruction rather, of wisdom. Wisdom itself, what it can teach us, what it can tell us. To receive justice, to receive judgment, and to receive equity, which is everything is equal and fair to all people. I know we kind of float with that word equity these days. Some people come up with a new definition.
Not the same as equality.
A lot of people are turning it into equal outcome, which is not what it really is. I mean, if equity meant equal outcome, it means we all are going to receive the exact same thing in the end. And that's not necessarily the case. Some of us are going to get more or less blessings. Some are going to heaven, some are going to hell. I mean, we're not all going to end up in the same place. That's not what equity means. Equity means we all have equal opportunity to get to where God intends us to be. Ultimately, that is heaven, obviously. But we're not just automatically going to get there because we want to, right? Or because we think so, or because of what we believe. It's about adhering to the truth, understanding wisdom, understanding God's wisdom, all that sort of stuff. There are 4 target audiences that are mentioned here, and we see this starting in verse 4. And one of the target audiences is the simple-minded. Some people translate that as the naive, the person who present accounted for. It says it is to give subtlety to the simple, even people on a very fundamental level, cognitively or just whatever, however you want to interpret that. This is there to benefit them as well. Prudence, I think, is another word that is used instead of subtlety there. And what that means is to give the ability to make good choices. That's what prudence means. That's what subtlety means in this case. So even to the simple-minded, even to the most basic fundamental way of thinking, this is still beneficial to that person to help them make good choices. To the young man, it says, but I could apply that in either way, men or women. But to the young, the benefit is to give knowledge and discretion. What does discretion mean?
Good decisions.
Making good decisions, making good judgment calls. So kind of the same thing, but to even a little higher maybe cognitive level of thinking. Third group of people is to the wise. So this is not just to the fundamental. This is to the people who have wisdom already. Verse 5 says, a wise man will hear and increase in learning. Some people think that they get to a point where they no longer need to learn anything new. That's not wisdom. We're always going to be learning something new till the day we die. We're never going to get to where we need to be with God. There's always room for improvement. There's always room for growth. So there's always room for gaining more knowledge and increasing in learning. We won't be like Jesus until we see him, literally, till we're there, and that's when we receive our perfection. Fourth type of person is the man of understanding, or a person who has got it all, well, mostly figured out, right? They really understand a lot of the things. It says, to them they shall attain to wise counsels. They will be the people that others can come to. That they will be able to provide that type. Anybody in here feel like they're at that level yet?
I understand that I need wise counsel.
Right. Exactly. That's exactly where I'm at. And then verse 6 tells us the purpose of reading the Proverbs. And this is kind of where it gets into why are we studying this? And we've seen the audiences, we've seen kind of what Proverbs is, but why are we doing this? To understand a proverb and the interpretation, the words of the wise and their dark saying. So we are here to understand basically wisdom and what wisdom is, what it says, how to implement it. To understand comparisons is a way we could say that. Instead of understand proverbs, a proverb, to understand a comparison, be able to apply it in our everyday life, and the interpretation of these comparisons. A lot of people say, well, the Bible means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. And that may be the case on some level. But the Bible also said it is not of any private interpretation. I mean, it means what it says, and it says what it means. It's kind of how I like to put it. There is something to learn, and it's not really open to, subjective interpretation. But we need to understand, what is wisdom telling us? What lessons can we learn? How can we apply it at various points in our life?
But it can also be said that a person can read, two people can read the same
Sure.
scripture, but God will speak to them differently based on what their needs are.
They can, based on their current situation. Like, we may sit in the service and hear a message, and somebody gets convicted about something completely different than what you do. But I don't think there'll ever be a conflict where one person interprets it one way, which is in complete contradiction to the way another person interprets it. I think we can receive different benefits out of it, but to draw completely different conclusions. For example, Paul closed out, what did we just finish? Acts? No, Romans. We just finished, I'm all over the place in my head. He said to greet everyone with a holy kiss. Right? We don't do that. Right? But some people may interpret that we literally need to go around kissing each other all the time. And some people may take that, and they've written Bibles that are pro-homosexuality. And they portray Jesus and the disciples as a homosexual group. And that was the brotherly love. And that's why they kissed each other and all this sort of stuff. That's completely wrong interpretation, obviously. So that's what I'm talking about, is the interpretation should not be in conflict to the truth of what it's trying to say. But yes, we may get different things out of it individually that may benefit you at your phase in your life or your point in the week or whatever.
Well, even the individual, you hear the sermon one time and then hear it the second time.
Absolutely.
Do apply to different ways.
Same thing with reading the Bible. I get something different out of it every time. But the truth and the wisdom being bestowed is kind of the consistent thing. And that's what I believe it's talking about when it says the interpretation of what it truly means in essence of the truth of God. There's another Bible verse that says that we should rightly divide the word of truth, to be able to read it and decipher it in a way that's the way God intended it to be given, kind of thing, not open to interpretation, kind of is the thing. So to understand and interpret words of the wise, it mentions there in the middle of verse 6, and their dark sayings. What do we say that was?
Riddles.
Riddles or
Mystery.
okay.
I have a little asterisk.
Mysteries, riddles.
I have a little asterisk beside some of the words in this Bible, and it says riddles on it.
Right.
And there's some other.
And there is a lot of mystery with God. One of my favorite verses, can't remember if it's first or second. Yeah, First Timothy 3:16 says, "And without controversy, great is the mystery of godliness." And it sums up the whole story. God was manifest in the flesh, justified in the spirit, seen of angels, preached unto the Gentiles, believed on in the world, and received up into glory. That's the entire message of the Bible in one verse. And that is a mystery. And that's kind of what he's saying, is the things that are hard to understand, that's what the Proverbs is trying to teach us, how to get a grasp of that and interpret it correctly. So our starting point for all this is just kind of where we stopped last week, is found in verse 7. So the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. And here's our first comparison in this one verse. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, but fools despise wisdom and instruction. So we talked about the fear of the Lord being a reverence, being not being scared of God, but being soberly aware of who He is versus who we are. I mean, He is in ultimate control over our eternal destiny. And He's given us how it works in the Bible, and He'll never break a promise, so we understand that. But again, our interpretation of what we read can sometimes lead ourselves astray. There's a lot of people genuinely think that they're a believer and that they're going to heaven. And Matthew tells a different story. This verse really messed me up for a long time, and it's Matthew 7. Verse 21 says, "Not everyone that says unto me, Lord, Lord, shall enter into the kingdom of heaven."
That messes with me.
Continue to read again. Context puts us in the right perspective here. "But he that doeth the will of my Father which is in heaven. Many will say to me in that day, Lord, Lord, have we not done a bunch of stuff," basically. "Have we not prophesied in your name? And in your name cast out devils? And in your name done many wonderful works?" I've never prophesied. I've never cast out a devil. I doubt I've done anything really considered to be a wonderful work. And these people have done it in the name of Jesus. But they still didn't go to heaven.
That's the same thing like as the KKK. They said they were Christian.
They claimed to be a Christian
But
group.
obviously
Right.
what they did was not.
Because Jesus' response is, "Then I will profess unto them, I never knew you. Depart from me, ye that work iniquity." The point is, they were trying to get there based on the things they did. Have we not done this, and done this, and done this? It's like, well, that's not what it's about. It's what I've done, not what you've done. Again, interpreting the
But if
wisdom
you
of the
were
thing.
able to cast out demons, you would think, I mean, did it in His name, so it had to be His power.
It was His power.
Right.
Yeah, it's an interesting twist.
Yeah, so He didn't know them, but He did.
But He still did work through them.
Wow.
Wasn't it?
That's
what does
pretty-
he say because he, of his, gosh, I'm trying to struggle now, his integrity, what he says he is.
Right.
So we're calling upon that.
We're
So
calling
he's
upon the
gonna
greatness of
fulfill it.
God, so God's going to do it,
Mhm.
even through a person that's not really a believer. That's something else.
Yeah.
That's something to consider. And again, there's the wisdom of, because a lot of people think, some people in the book of Acts are coming to Peter saying, "Can you pay me some money to teach me how to do these things you're doing?" We had that one story, and he's like, you're missing the whole point. This is not something I'm doing. Even the believers, it's not them doing these things of their own ability. It's letting God do it through them. And God can use anybody he wants. He used Pharaoh, right, to free the Hebrews. He used Moses to show up, but it had to be at Pharaoh's word that they were able to leave. So God even worked through Pharaoh to show his greatness. And we talked about that I think in Romans, it talked about it. So he can use anybody in any way. And that takes some discernment, some words we're using, and some wisdom to really kind of understand that. And I don't fully understand all that quite yet. But I know that God is able to do great and amazing things. So that's the fear of the Lord, is just understanding He is this Almighty. He is the creator of all things. And just the reverence to Him, the fear of Him is the beginning of knowledge. But then it says, but fools despise wisdom and instruction. So how could we define, because we see the word fool used quite a bit in the Proverbs. And I knew several people, must have been a pastor before me, taught this. But there were several, including deacons at the church I pastored in North Carolina, that said they will never use the word fool, and especially to call someone that, because they feared they would damn themselves to hell. Because there's a verse that says, if you say thou fool, you receive the condemnation, or something like that. That's not expressing wisdom. To think that you could say a word and that condemn you to hell is a little ridiculous after you've been saved. That it could be that easy to slip out of the hand of God. And the Bible clearly says that no one can pluck him out of my hand, and I believe that means an individual person as well. You know, you're not saved by any words you said. You're saved by the finished work of the cross of Calvary. You're saved by what Jesus did on your behalf, and you're accepting His payment of your sins on your behalf, and that's what saves you, and your faith in Him, and trust in Him to get to heaven.
It's not really a politically correct word to use in today's times either.
What's that?
Fool.
Fool, yeah. Yeah, it's not a politically correct word, I guess, as well. But the Bible's pretty clear that this person that they call fool despises wisdom and instruction. So what's that look like? How does someone despise wisdom and instruction?
Well, like these people that spit in the face of the law officer when he pulls them over because they're breaking the law.
Right.
But they think they're entitled and they shouldn't have been pulled over.
Right.
And they do worse than that.
I'm
They
sure.
actually physically assaulted them and
Right.
called them everything but a white man, and you know.
Yeah, we
I
see
mean,
all that on the internet
That to
all the
me
time.
is foolishness.
Absolutely.
I don't want to be submissive.
They don't want to be submissive.
Yeah.
That's like the whole, like, they despise the fact that they are born a certain gender.
Right. It's doing something that's obviously dumb.
Mhm.
Yeah.
You know, I would kind of have to say it that way. It's obvious they're not supposed to do this, but they think it's normal, and that's a big portion of our society today. There are a lot of fools out there, and this verse says that fools despise wisdom. So a lot of talk about wisdom here. We've talked about we need to know wisdom, we need to receive the instruction of wisdom, and that fools are those who despise the wisdom and instruction. So there's a lot to be said about wisdom here in the front half of this passage. He goes on to say in verses 8 and 9, my son. So who is writing? Solomon, right? I should know this, but I don't. Did he have kids?
With that many wives?
I would assume that many wives and girlfriends, 1,000 of them, he would have some kids. So we don't know if he's speaking to his son literally, or if he's just speaking as if this is a person who needs to receive instruction from an authoritative figure, such as a father or a mother. Both are mentioned here. So this is someone who needs to receive something. My son, hear the instruction of thy father, and forsake not the law of thy mother. So what do you think the instruction of thy father and the law of thy mother is all about? What is that?
When you think of your mother's law being things like, don't throw your clothes on the floor.
Right.
You know, put your dishes in the sink, things that I guess you need to do, but the instruction of your father maybe is more the bit of wisdom that spiritual,
So, yes, I think all that is perfectly good. This could also mean the law of thy mother, could mean the instruction that the mother is giving, or the law that she lives by, which ultimately should be God's law. My study Bible says on instruction, so law says is literally teaching. It implies a person of authority passing on moral guidelines. In other contexts, the same word designates God's law, such as in Deuteronomy and other places in Proverbs. The reader should not make too much of the pairing of instruction with the father and the law with the mother. Splitting them is merely an aspect of Hebrew poetry. Both parents participated in this homeschooling. So it's simply trying to portray this person has a good moral structure that's been given to them based on godly principles, and they should not forsake it. They should listen to it. They should hear it and advise, live by it. For they, verse 9 says, being the instruction and the law, for they shall be an ornament of grace unto thy head and chains about thy neck. What's that all about?
like kingly apparel.
Okay, it's something that, do what? Something you should be proud of. Something that others should be able to see upon you. Something you're not ashamed of. Something that others can obviously see in your life that you're living by it.
That goes along with the commandment, honor your father and mother.
Absolutely, honor your father.
Days may be long.
That's it. And days may be long upon the earth. I've heard that said that, Bill Cosby, however we feel about him, he's like, I brought you into this world, I'll take you out. Some people have tried it. Your days may be long upon the earth. If you'll listen to mom and dad, they might beat you to death, right? I'm sure that's not what that really means. But, excuse me, following godly instruction should be something for everyone to see and something to be proud of, as you mentioned. That's just some kind of notes I took on there. So now we're getting into kind of the real life lessons of chapter 1. Anybody got any thoughts or questions before we get into this section of it?
It's hard to honor your father and mother, though, for some people that don't even know who their father is.
Yes, very true. That's wisdom right there. Yeah, some people don't have a earthly mom and dad that they're even aware of. They're being raised. I got students raised by grandparents, raised by aunts and uncles, and you can tell the difference in their life and how they act in the classroom and how they see themselves versus the ones who have a mom and dad at home. There's a big difference. As a teacher, I can see that, and I've seen it for 25 years. It's kind of sad. All right, so here we get into kind of a new little phase of direct. I'm going to teach you something here, and let's learn. So my son, this could be applied to anyone, just someone who needs to learn. We could go back and say that son is one of the 4 types of people mentioned already over in verse 5. If sinners entice thee, consent thou not. If they say, come with us, let us lay wait for blood. Let us lurk privily for the innocent without cause. Let us swallow them up alive as the grave, and whole as those that go down into the pit. We shall find all precious substance. We shall fill our houses with spoil. So, this sounds like a crowd that's up to no good.
Yeah.
And we see, this, let's lurk privily for the innocent without a cause. One of the phrases that comes to mind is, some people say, let's go do it just for the fun of it. You see this especially today with the riots and the protesters, and the people go out and start attacking police officers. They don't know these police officers. They don't know anything about them. They just hate what they stand for. Ultimately, they hate good because they hate God when you get down to it. And they're just acting out, and they're just wanting to go out and cause some trouble and get into mischief. And in many cases, they end up killing people. I mean, so this is not far off the mark from what we're seeing today. I mean, this seems pretty graphic, but we're seeing this. Even in today's world of people just doing stuff just to be doing stuff that ends up taking the lives of the innocent and doing things just because they want to get away with it. Because they think, verse 13, we shall find all precious substance. We shall fill our houses with spoil. What do people get out of doing stuff like that? Or do they think they do?
I think they get like
Stuff.
yeah. Or a sense of like, look at me, I'm all bad.
Yeah, it's more of an image.
Yeah.
They look like I'm making a difference in the world, free Palestine and all this sort of stuff. Which I get, the innocent in Palestine don't need to be under the rule of Hamas, but that's not what they mean. They mean annihilate all the Jews and get them wiped off the planet so that they don't have to deal with them anymore. And that's what they're saying. And I've seen some interviews with people asking, do you really know what this means? A lot of people don't. They're just out there for the excitement of the mob and the group. And they're out there just thinking, hey, people are going to see me and I'm out here doing a great cause. But when they really get to start thinking about it, they don't support.
Most of them probably don't even know where Palestine is.
That's exactly right. That's why a lot of them said you can't even point it on a
Yeah.
map. You only know what river and what sea they're talking about. Palestine shall be free from the river to the sea. They don't even know what that means. They don't know what river it is. Y'all know what river it is? Y'all know what river it is? See? I mean, our younger generation doesn't even know. It's the Jordan River where Jesus was baptized, and the sea's the Mediterranean Sea. It's the piece of land right between those two. And they're saying, get all the Jews out of there so the Palestinians can be free from them. Well, they need to be free from Hamas, because Hamas is who's killing them all.
Is that not the land that God gave?
It's exactly, that's the land that God gave them.
Well, it's never gonna work for them, no matter
That's-
how hard they go at it.
That's exactly right. So, again, that's working some wisdom into that. But they think they're going to, impress somebody, I guess, and that's what they're getting at. We shall find precious substance. We're making a difference. We're doing something for ourselves, and we shall fill our houses with spoil. That could be physical things, like Bill said, of getting items and taking it home. How did this is kind of wisdom, or maybe Solomon speaking, but more so wisdom. He started this off of, if sinners entice thee. And then he says in verse 14, cast in thy lot among us. So this is people of the world trying to talk you into joining them. Let us all have one purse, which means we're all invested in this cause. We're all invested in this same thing. There's a story that about Jeff Robertson, the Duck Dynasty people. The youngest son there for a while, him and one of their cousins, Zach is his name. They were into drugs and doing all kinds of crazy stuff. And Jet would often go down to the local bar and just hang out down there and drink and carry on. And he later told this story. He said, it's weird because I made a lot of friends doing that. And what they all told me when I showed up is, man, we're really glad you're here with us. He said, I never really got that until after he came out of it and talked about it with his dad and his family. And what it really boiled down to is, Phil was already saved at the time. He was already in a place where he needed to be spiritually and a father figure and all that. He'd got his life straightened out, but Jeff was still acting this way. So it really was a disgrace to his family name. But his friends were saying, we're really glad you're here with us. And he said what it was is they saw me as part of a prominent family, but I was still there with them, making themselves feel better about their choices. Because it's like I was coming down to their level, which in their mind was helping lift themselves up, like, oh, we're doing the same thing the Robertsons are doing. But they really weren't. They were doing the same thing one of the Robertsons was doing. And once he finally came out of that, he quit going back to the bar and all that sort of stuff. But that's kind of what this is talking about, is they want you, as a Christian, to invest in their sinful lifestyle. I think that's what's happened with this LGBT stuff, is they want to call themselves Christians, and they want us to approve of what they're doing so they feel better about what they're doing, when they know what they're doing is wrong to begin with.
It's like in high school when a classmate offers a cigarette to
Right.
another classmate, here, have one of these, you can join us.
Right.
But what he's really offering you is, here, take 30 years off your life,
Right.
have one of these, get a habit like this.
Because they know what they're doing is
And
wrong.
drinking's the same way.
Right. And today's culture is drugs and everything else. They're trying to make themselves feel better about what they're doing, even though they know what they're doing is wrong. And that's why verse 10, he starts off saying, don't let sinners entice you. If they do, don't consent. Because they're going to say, we're going to make a name for ourselves and do all this wonderful stuff, so cast in your lot among us, let us all have the same purse. My son, the instruction here is, walk not in the way with them. Refrain thy foot from their path. He's like, don't even go down that road, because it's not going to end well. And by testimony of people who live life long enough, if they do, can testify that that is the truth. You don't even want to go down that path. It never leads to anything good. Sadly, a lot of teens don't get too far in life. I was thinking about this the other day. I know of at least, in my 25 years of teaching, I know of at least, personally, 15 students who didn't make it to graduation. They died. I've been to several of their funerals. Some of it was suicide, some of it was car wrecks. Those are two. I think one maybe was a heart attack. That was just a fluke kind of thing. But most of it was just bad choices. Led to a lifestyle that shortened their life to the point. So he's saying, don't even go down that path. Do not go that direction. Verse 16 goes on to say, for their feet run to evil, and make haste to shed blood. Surely in vain the net is spread in the sight of any bird. That's a weird shift. It's all of a sudden in the middle of this, we're talking about nets and birds, and what does he mean by that?
Don't get caught. Like getting caught in a net. Like,
So it says, surely in
The
vain
birds don't know that they're going to be trapped.
the net is spread in the sight of any bird. Basically, and I've read a lot of commentaries on this,
See the net,
is like
they fly.
in this case, the bird is sitting there and you're setting a trap for it, and you actually think that bird's going to get in the trap if they know what it is. Whether they know what it is or not, we don't know. But what he's saying is they're doing themselves in. That would be our saying today. They're doing this knowing it's not going to end well for them, knowing it's not going to be the right thing to do, and what they're doing is completely in vain. Because, verse 18 says, they lay wait for their own blood. They lurk privily for their own lives. It's like by doing these things and living this kind of life, they're just causing themselves harm. And they're doing all this in vain. They're doing it for no good reason whatsoever. So are the ways of every one that is greedy of gain, which taketh away the life of the owners thereof. Now that could mean certainly physical life, but also just a peaceable life. If you live that kind of lifestyle, I don't know many people that they interview on TV that participate in this kind of stuff that seem very happy. They're miserable. They might put on a front on social media, right? But when you get to really digging into their life and hearing some of the deeper interviews, I've heard seen all kinds of interviews of the transgender transition stuff, and it's years later. Usually the first few years are like, oh yeah, this is, it's like kind of the newness of it. They think it's cool, and then they realize 5 to 10 years later what they've done to themselves, and they're like, I wish I'd never done it. And then they're on people like Matt Walsh's, movie that he made. What was that? What is a Woman? And just begging people Don't go down this road. Do not let your children do this. You're just setting themselves up for failure. They're possibly never going to be able to procreate and have kids. They're never going to have a normal life. They're going to have horrible health conditions the rest of their life. And they don't tell you all this going into it. It's kind of the exact same thing with this. They don't tell you all the bad stuff. And they end up messing their lives up for the rest of their lives. And that's kind of what this is saying is this is all dumb. It's all bad choices. There's no wisdom in this at all. And then verse 20 down to 32 really it kind of makes the overall point. I don't know if we'll get in chapter 2, but that's fine. We'll do that next week. So verse 20 shifts kind of the conversation. We see, again, starting out chapter 1, we need to know wisdom. We need to receive the instruction of wisdom. We see that fools despise wisdom. And here's what's going to happen to them. Wisdom, as a person, crieth out. So this is like personifying wisdom as an individual. Wisdom crieth out. She uttereth her voice in the streets. She crieth in the chief place of concourse, in the openings of the gates. In the city she uttereth her words, saying. So basically saying wisdom is everywhere. It's out there. And this is what wisdom is telling all people. How long, ye simple ones, will you love simplicity? And the scorners delight in their scorning. And fools, there's that word again, hate knowledge. Like, how long are you going to do this to yourself? You know, some people never come out of this. Some people's lives are ended too short to come out of it. And wisdom is saying, how long are you going to tolerate this? Turn you at my reproof. Behold, I will pour out my spirit unto you, and I will make known my words unto you. Again, who's speaking here? It almost sounds as if God is speaking, and it kind of is. But in this direct, poetical sense, it is wisdom speaking this to all people. Because I have called and you have refused, I have stretched out my hand, and no man has regarded. This sounds a lot like God talking to the nation of Israel. All day long I stood and reached my hand out to you, and you rejected me. This is wisdom speaking to these people. But you have set it naught, all my counsel. You just basically ignored it all, and would none of my reproof. You're not listening. I've said, how many have said that to their kids? You're not listening to me. All right? You just throwing it all away. You're not listening to what I'm saying. And this is interesting. Some people see this as a cruel passage, but this is just truth. This is what happens. I also will laugh at your calamity. I will mock when your fear cometh. When your fear cometh as desolation, and your destruction cometh as a whirlwind, when distress and anguish comes upon you, then you will call upon me. You know, I try to get in the mind of this a little bit. You know, we watch these, I say generally as people, watch these fail videos, you know, and it's like, what were you thinking?
Exactly.
And I watch a lot of gym videos sometimes, and you'll see somebody trying to lift way too much weight, and the bar falls down on them, and they're stuck under it, and they're sitting there for 15 minutes trying to get out from under it. I've done that myself. I've lifted too much weight as a younger person, and just it come down on me, and I'm sitting there trying to get the bar off, and there's nobody around, and it's kind of like, idiot, what do you think was going to happen? That's kind of what this is getting at. Wisdom is saying, you know, because we see those videos, and what do? We laugh about it. This is wisdom saying, I'm going to laugh at you because you're getting ready to do something dumb, and you know better. You're not listening to me, so go ahead. You've made your bed, now lie in it, kind of thing. This is going to be, you know, once you're in deep trouble, then shall you call upon me, verse 28 says. But I will not answer. They shall seek me early, but they will not find me. You know, when you're sitting there in the courtroom, getting ready to be sentenced for something that you did, too late to listen to wisdom. All the wisdom in the world is not going to help you at that point. You got to accept your consequences and just move forward with whatever, you know, lies ahead of you. That's kind of what it's saying here. You're going to seek me out. You're not going to find me. You're going to call upon me, but I'm not going to answer. For they that hated knowledge and did not choose the fear of the Lord, those fools that's described, they would none of my counsel. They would not hear of it. They despised all my reproof. It's kind of like, don't you wish you'd listened the first time? I have those conversations with my students a lot. You know, they get in trouble. I tell them, don't do this, don't do that. And then they do it anyway. And then they're sitting in the principal's office. And I'm like, well, you know, I told you. Don't you wish you'd listened? That's kind of what wisdom is saying to these people. Therefore, verse 31 says, shall they eat of the fruit of their own way and be filled with their own devices. That sounds a lot like Romans, doesn't it? That God turns them over to a reprobate mind. That they just do those things which are not convenient, do those things which are foolish, we could probably say. For the turning away of the simple shall slay them, and the prosperity of fools shall destroy them. So this is a stark warning, right, to the people who this proverb is talking to people who need to receive instruction, to need to learn a lesson. Learn from my mistakes. Don't learn from your own. Sometimes we have to learn from our own mistakes, but oftentimes it's better if we can learn from previous people's mistakes.
It's a cheap lesson then.
Yeah,
You learn from somebody else.
absolutely. It's a lot better
That's a lot better.
to do it that way. But, and here we go with the comparison again. So we've had this bad example, wisdom saying, you know, this is what you need to be doing, but this is what's going to happen if you don't. And this is almost a recap of Romans 1. That's the whole concept of Romans 1 is this is what's going to happen to you if you don't live a godly life. It's kind of the same exact thing. Verse 33, to sum it up, says, but whoso hearkeneth unto me, who's me? Wisdom. Whosoever will listen to wisdom shall dwell safely, and shall be quiet from fear of evil. Now again, this is not a hard set, lifelong promise that as long as you do everything you're supposed to do, that bad things won't come your way. That's not a promise. But it is a wise lesson that pretty much, we could say the majority of the time, if you exercise wisdom and don't do these dumb things that a lot of people are doing these days, then yeah, your life's going to be better. You're going to dwell safely. You're going to be quiet from the fear of evil. I want to ask for a show of hands, but I'm sure at some point in our lives we've all been through a phase of our life where we're just not doing what we need to do on whatever level. And you don't sleep well at night. You worry. You lay there and say, man, this is dumb. What if I get caught? What if this happens? What if, if you're not managing your money right or something? What if, I run out of money? What am I going to do then? What if I lose my job? What if I lose, we sit there and worry about all these things. But if we exercise wisdom and live a wise and knowledgeable life according to God's plan, this says we'll dwell safely, we'll be quiet from the fear of evil. You're just going to have a peace that's way different than if you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing in life. Learn chapter 1. Y'all got any thoughts, questions, or anything you can add to that?
What was the chapter where you were talking about it's better to learn from someone else's mistakes than yours?
I just kind of made the point, but I don't know. I don't know that that's a Bible verse, but it's definitely a truth.
I had an older brother that always getting in trouble.
Right. I'm sure it's probably in the Bible somewhere. I'd have
As a
to.
consequence, I didn't do what he did.
Right.
But that was good to be wisdom.
Absolutely.
To observe, to learn without having to go
They
through
go
it
through it
yourself.
yourself. Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's definitely a wise way to live.
But isn't it, oh, go ahead.
Well, that's just like us all telling our kids, because
Right.
we've made those mistakes, that this is a mistake, but they still have to do it on their own and figure
Yeah,
out that
sometimes
it is
they
a
do.
mistake.
Sometimes they got to pay them speeding tickets, right? Sometimes we got to learn the lessons the hard way. That's it.
Is that the
He's
first
always
time?
like, no, that's my second.
Oh. Okay, Erica deal.
Yeah, she didn't learn the first
She got
time.
like 4 and was in 2 wrecks before she
Oh, wow.
finally figured it out.
Sometimes it's, it takes us longer to learn. I've done it myself, I've been there
We're all
too.
guilty of that.
That's it. All right, well, I'll shut this thing down online. We'll get into chapter 2 next week. Thank y'all for joining us. We'll see you then.